Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 47, brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear. Today we're talking hunting beast style in Pennsylvania public lands with Mike Perry, so stay tuned. What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday to all of you. I hope everyone is feeling good in the cervid-obsessed community. You're listening to episode number 47 of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. Let's talk about our partners here real quick. We are brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear, the longest lasting, fastest cutting, toughest tree trimming equipment you've ever used. Simply put, the toughest damn saw on earth. And right now, if you visit wickedtreegear.com and use the promo code TRUTH at checkout, you get a 20% discount on your Wicked purchase. And I actually had a buddy text me the other day and was just like, hey man, I'm looking at some hand saws, or, how legit are these Wicked Tree Gear saws? And my response back was like, dude, if you buy this saw, you plan on not having to buy another one, and that is exactly what will happen if you purchase one of these saws. It'll be the last one you likely buy. But the bad news is that you'll probably want to get all their other pieces of gear, all the pull saws and stuff, because that is exactly what kind of happened to me. We are also brought to you by Exodus Outdoor Gear. Life's a passion, pursue it. You've heard me talk about these guys. I go on and on about them all the time. Their kick-ass camera, their kick-ass customer support, their 5-year warranty, their no bullshit theft policy. So do yourself a favor and head over to their website and check them out. Also, at this point, they now have launched a new Exodus truck camera, or Trek camera, not truck camera. And this is coming in underneath the $150 price point. So it's a very affordable camera. And talking to the boys at Exodus just yesterday, I believe they still have 100 cameras left on the pre-order where you can get a steal by pre-ordering at ExodusOutdoorGear.com. But have no fear. Once those 100 cameras are gone or have been purchased, Truth from the Stand, we've got you covered here with a promo code TRUTH at checkout, and you save $20 on a purchase. So either pre-order it. If the 100 are gone, we got you covered with a promo code. Tecumani Seed. So make sure when you're planting seed this year, not in a biblical sense, but in a food plot sense, that you are using Tecumani Seed. No matter if you're in the South, Midwest, or Northeast, Tecumani has your food plot needs covered. Visit Tecumani.com and check out the product selector tool, and it'll help you pick the right seed for your food plots and for your property. Use promo code TRUTH at checkout and save 20%. And last but not least, Glacier Coolers, simply the world's finest. I don't know if you've seen the one that John and I were talking about, the ice bag, I believe it's called. The thing is huge. You can pretty much stuff an entire body in it. Not saying that you should, but if you ever needed to dispose of one, you could probably do it with the ice bag. Whether you're hunting, camping, or fishing, or maybe just getting rid of a body, you'll enjoy smarter design, stronger construction, and superior insulation of Glacier Coolers. Visit them at glaciercoolers.com, and of course, promo code TRUTH will save you some cash in the form of 20%. So we got a great show today. We're talking with Mike Perry from Pennsylvania. He's a guy that I've wanted to have on for a while. I've been looking for a dude that really kind of grinds it out on PA public land, and this is my guy. So he hunts, a lot of you guys I know out there are familiar with the hunting beast. He hunts beast style, super mobile. He's looking for buck beds, getting into nasty places, crossing a lot of water, hunting a lot of swampy areas. So I think he'll be right up everyone's alley out there listening. I know that I took a lot from the conversations with Mike, and he's just kind of a funny dude too, man. So I think you all enjoyed the conversation, and we'll go ahead and get this party cranking. Without further ado, here's Mike. All right, we are live, and we are joined by Mike Perry. Mike Perry is from Pennsylvania, and if I'm remembering correctly, he's from the western side of the state. However, he is not a Steeler fan. If I'm remembering correctly, again, I think he's a Dolphins fan, but we'll try not to hold that against him during the hour that we'll spend during the hour that we'll spend together here.
Unfortunately, yeah.
What's that? Go ahead.
I said, unfortunately, yes, I'm a Dolphins fan.
Yeah, well, the same could be said for my Steelers right about now, since the showing that they had against one of the other Florida teams. But as I was mentioning, Mike's from Pennsylvania, and I followed Mike on social media for a while now, and the way I guess this podcast kind of came about was, John and I've had guys on from the Midwest, whether it's Wisconsin or, places like Michigan and stuff like that, that are guys who are, hardcore DIY public land hunters. And so, being from Pennsylvania and knowing, anyone who's hunted PA knows that it's a tough hunt from a pressure standpoint, and it's just it's not an easy hunt. So I was looking for someone from Pennsylvania that people held in high regard, and so I actually went on Dan Infalt's Hunting Beast forum, and I just kind of put out the question. It was like, hey, I'm looking for a guy that you guys think is a guy that I should talk to when it comes to getting it done on public land, hunting mature deer, and that has good success and is just a good dude. And overwhelmingly, Mike Perry's name came back. So I got on the old Facebooks, on the interwebs, and looked up Mike Perry, and he was gracious enough to come on. So before we get everything cranking, Mike, how are you doing, sir?
Doing good. How about you?
Not too bad, man. Yeah. So it's a PA public land hunting. It's a grinder, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's a heck of a challenge. There's a lot of pressure, and but there's a lot of public land to hunt too, so it makes it nice. And there's a lot of big tracks, and that also helps out and get away from people. Yeah,
for sure, man. So before we get jumping into the tactics and kind of your approach to how you dissect public land and how you go about hunting it, just give me a little bit of background about yourself. How you started hunting, what you do for a living, and where you live.
Okay, well, I live in Northwest Pennsylvania. And I'm a supervisor, a load and dock supervisor for a newspaper. We're the trucking that drives the paper. We have a print site that's about 100 miles away. So every night we're driving to the print site with me and the drivers and bringing the paper back and forth. And what else was it?
Oh, the other part of it was just where you just the background, how you got started hunting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I started hunting. My grandparents bought a farm in '69. I was 4 years old, and we started coming out here on the weekends. I just fell in love with being out here, and my grandpa started taking me hunting when I was a kid, and we just did the small game thing. And he got into bow hunting, into like the early '80s, and I was interested in that. I didn't really get into bow hunting until mid '80s, but that's pretty much what lit the fire there, was going out with my grandpa, my uncles.
Yeah, it's a very familiar story, I think, for a lot of folks from PA in terms of how they get started hunting. Hunting in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a big heritage hunting state, so you typically are learning from one of your family members, and it kind of runs in the blood. I know for me, one of the big things was whenever I got old enough to hunt, it was you kind of became part of the club with the men of the family, so to speak, and you got invited to hunting camp and stuff like that. Once you hit that certain age, they would start to involve you in things, and you just thought you were the cat's ass at that point. Was it kind of a similar thing for you?
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, the first time I got to go, just small game hunting with those guys, it was a huge deal. And then they wouldn't allow me to hunt deer even with a rifle until I was about 16, because, as you know, living in PA, that it's, like the largest armed militia in the United States on the first day of buck season here.
It
so,
is.
They're just like, we'll wait until you're a little bit older. And that's when I started the deer hunting part of it. So.
Right. So speaking of deer hunting, man, how was your 2017 season? Or, here in the eastern part of the state, we're still kind of going. I don't know if Ohio is wrapped up, but how's your year been this year so far?
That's been great, and the best thing that came of it is my son shot his first deer, which was a buck deer in archery, and I kind of changed my whole outlook towards hunting this year and spent most of October hunting with my kids instead of out shooting does like I normally would, or trying to get it close on a buck bed or something like that. So, and I ended up shooting a nice buck for around here in PA, deer and gun, shot him in his bed, and I shot a couple does, in Ohio and PA. So one with the bow and one with the gun.
Nice. So yeah,
it's been going real good. I had opportunities that I messed up on a really good buck in Ohio, but I don't really want to think about that right now. It's been haunting me every day since November 3rd. But
nice. Yeah, it happens.
It was a good season.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us, man. I did, as I was mentioning, I follow you on social media, and I saw whenever your boy got his first bow kill, man. So tell me about taking him on that. Like, I know when I was following along, he did a lot of the work, you know what I mean? As far as like, he was part of the scouting trips and kind of preparing for the season and stuff like that. Tell me how did you kind of help him or navigate him along, or how much did you navigate him along? Like, I'm just interested I think us with young kids, me, my daughter's 9 and she shoots a bow, and, it's one of the things I'm looking forward to is getting her out. So how did you kind of help him along that path? Kind of walk us through that.
Well, being my kids, they end up pretty much getting involved in hunting because I've had them out since they were. I would carry them, to go check cameras and stuff
Nice.
like that. So they're pretty much. I think they just think it's normal, but so they've been interested in it, both of them. And I've been taking them checking cameras and on short scouting missions. On a lot of the public land that I hunt. In Pennsylvania, it's too much to get them back in there right now at the size they are, because I'm always wearing waders and crossing creeks and beaver dams and stuff like that. So as far as on the public land in PA, I don't get them back in too far, but I have permission for some private land around here too. That I live in a rural area, farming area, and for shooting does and stuff like that. So.
Right.
That's basically what I did. Was I just got those guys. We went out. I scouted, mostly looking for apple orchards, acorns, stuff like that. We started looking early. We set cameras, and we set up some blinds and in some good areas, that had deer traffic, and that's pretty much how I spent the first 3 weeks of October. Is taking either both of them with me or one at a time. It's easier they wouldn't both be hunting, but one would just observe. And,
right.
And that's what we did.
Nice. That's awesome. So you were doing the blind bit for that?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. It was in a blind, and we've seen the buck. We hadn't seen nothing, and it was, probably 10 minutes left of legal shooting light. And I looked over and I seen this buck coming, and I said, "Hunter, here comes the buck, get ready." And he's like, "Where?" I'm like, "Don't worry, just look right out in front of the blind where the opening is and get ready." And he came through, and I grunted and stopped him, and I'm telling you, he didn't even hesitate. As soon as that deer stopped, he whacked him right through the goods. And he's jumping around yelling, I got him, and I'm just like, watch him, and the buck ran about 40 yards and stood there and looked around and just did that backflip, and I was just like, oh my goodness, it was awesome.
Right.
That was the best day ever.
That's awesome. And I think John or I would take one of those chip shots out in front of the blind. How about it, John, for this year?
Yeah. It's I tell you, I think about that new blind there that we saw at the ATA show.
Yeah.
With being able to see things, approaching, and you got to wonder, like with a new hunter, would he get his cage rattled if he got to watch the deer walk all the way around the blind, or is it better that he just popped into the window? You know what I mean? And there's not as much time to think about it.
I think in our case, it's better that he couldn't see the deer until he was like 10 yards away, getting ready to stop. So,
right.
But yeah, hunting out of blinds is new for us. I never hunted out of blinds other than I took those guys for turkeys in the spring with a blind, but the kids. But
right.
It's new to me. It's something that you got to get used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can say that I've not done a whole lot of blind hunting for deer, mostly in a stand. But I want to get cracking here on some of your experiences, man, because I definitely want to dig into kind of how you approach things and your approach to public land overall. But I know you mentioned you hunt Ohio. Do you hunt Pennsylvania, mm-hmm. Ohio, any other states that you throw in there every so often, or are those two kind of the consistent ones?
Not anymore. I used to hunt Ohio, New York, and PA for years, and I dropped New York kind of when I had my kids. So
yeah.
I figured it's too hard to juggle 3 states. I'm never going to stop Ohio. So
right.
But so just Ohio and PA.
Right. So have you always hunted predominantly public land? Because I know you mentioned you have a little bit of access, but is it something you've always done, or something you did as you got older, or was it out of necessity when you were younger? What was kind of the pushing toward hunting public land?
Well, I got into hunting public land in Pennsylvania for the fact that it's just bigger tracts of land in the kind of areas that I want to hunt. I want to hunt swamps and marshes and the places with big creek systems going through them, and beaver dams, and just nasty stuff where a buck could live long enough to get big. And around my house, I know I have a lot of permission because we always goose hunt in nuisance season, and the farmers, love when you kill flying rats.
Right.
But you can't, everybody, if they give somebody permission, they're going to give other people permission. The tracts around here are smaller, 100 acres or whatever. And, the deer may not be bedding or using the property that you have permission for. So that's why I got into the public. Is this everything's right there? You've got a big piece of public, and you have total access to whatever you need to use to try to kill the deer. So
yeah, that's
basically why I got into it.
Yeah, it's interesting, man, because I've heard just from a couple of the other guys who are hardcore public land hunters. I've heard a similar theme where their goal is to have as much opportunity to move to implement their strategy fully, rather than being limited by property lines, which you are on private ground. I ran into that this year where it's like I knew where a buck was living, I knew he was on the neighbors, I knew there was a pinch point that he was going to funnel through, on the way from bed to food or from food to bed, and I saw him, the one set I had for him. But if I were able to hunt across the property line, I probably could have had a better opportunity to kill him, I would imagine. And so that's kind of the limitation of private ground. And you're right, a lot of these nastier places do exist on public. So talk to me a little bit, you mentioned creek systems there, beaver dams. Like, so what are you looking for on a piece of public ground specifically? Like, is there something that you specifically kind of seek out? Is there elevation that you're looking for? Or you mentioned some water. I mean, what are those types of things that really catch your eye?
Mm-hmm. Well, around here, it's kind of a little bit rolling hills, but the elevation in the public land pieces that I'm hunting there's not, it's more or less flatland stuff. Sort of like areas of Ohio that I hunt in Northeast Ohio. So it's not really big terrain features. It's more or less I'm looking for swamps and creeks. Most of my best setups are on a bend in a creek, or where there's an oxbow lake, which you guys know what that is, right? An oxbow, where an old oxbow in the creek used to be, and then it fills in, and then it creates like a dead water half moon type thing.
Right. And
then I try to find places like that funnel deer through, because you use that with the creek or a beaver dam or something like that. And it creates funnels, and if you got bedding on either side of the funnels, it's going to be a hot spot for the rut usually. So
right.
You find stuff like that way back in there where there's nobody at, and that definitely ups your odds.
Right. And so you just mentioned where there's nobody at, and I think that's kind of the key there, right? Because everyone has access to it, and so it's all about trying to get away from the crowd. So with that in mind, one of the most challenging things of hunting the public land is just trying to avoid the crowds and pressure alone. I think that if you just do that successfully, like you're winning to a degree. So what's your approach, like, other than, you mentioned going, in kind of deeper into some nasty stuff, but what's your approach of trying to avoid pressure? Is it all about the distance that you're traveling? Or are you looking for certain types of sign and stuff like that to tell you where the kind of, I guess, where the barrier is that people aren't going to cross in terms of distance? So how do you avoid the pressure?
Waders, chest waders and hip waders. That's, honest to God, I mean, I don't know why guys are afraid of water, but I'm just glad they're afraid of water, because it doesn't have to. I shot a really good buck in PA. I can't remember what year it was, not that long ago. And I was not far from the road at all, but there was a marsh right there, and there was a parking area. In fact, I wanted to park in the parking area, but there was a bunch of cars parked there early in the morning, and first time I hunted it, I just parked on the road and walked all the way down and went in, and everybody was all hunting up on the top where the fields were and everything. But so it doesn't have to be far away, but most of my spots are long walks, 1-point-something miles. And what it is just water. I'm wearing waders to get across creeks and to get back into more remote areas. And although I will run into somebody every now and then, for the most part, those are the areas that no one's in, other than maybe a duck hunter finds his way back there or something.
Right. And usually
so that's what I'm looking for.
Right, and if you're in there and you see a guy in there, right, has the same mentality as you do, probably, or similar, so he's probably hunting it right. You know what I mean? Like, he's probably hunting.
Yeah, and
he's got good access.
Yeah, I've run across that.
Yeah.
And usually those guys are decent, and in fact, I the one piece of public that I hunt, there's two guys that I run into back in there. Quite a ways. It's like a 1.8 mile walk, and they're not pounding it, they're not hunting it all the time. The one guy's actually from Texas, and he only comes up and hunts for a week. So like that week, even though it's during the first week of November, I don't go back in there that week, because the guy only hunts 1 week out of the year in PA. He grew up around here. It's like he lets me know he's coming, and I'm just like, well, have fun. This is what I got pictures of. This is what I've seen. I have no problem with it. Right. And the other guy, he, same thing. We keep in contact. So, they're decent folks. It works out good.
Nice. Yeah. It's nice to hear that kind of story, because I think we hear a lot of the opposite often enough, where folks sitting in trees next to each other. I saw something on Facebook the one day where a guy climbed a tree and there was a guy sitting right across from him, like in the tree right next to him, and like wouldn't move because he was there first. It was kind of ridiculous. But
well, trust me, I've had horror stories too. I have one particular property that I hunt that there's a guy that's been hunting in there for years and years, and I go out of my way to stay out of this guy's way, but he's still just, he anybody that comes in here, he's messing with them. He'll go as far as walking around you if you're in there during gun season. He doesn't carry a gun. He just walks around and tries to spook stuff from you. I mean, he's pretty bad with it. He takes people's equipment and throws it in the creek. And
oh, jeez.
So, yeah, there are bad eggs out there that I've had to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
sure.
It's always nice if you're good to other people, they're going to be good to you.
Right. One of the things I like to do too is obviously put a little distance. The water thing, I've not yet had there was one spot I scouted that I wanted to hunt this past year. I just didn't make it there to hunt this year, that I had to cross some water, which was honestly why I liked it. But the other thing I'll look for too is I'll just kind of look for the sign from the previous year and just see if there's any human sign. Did anyone leave a stand somewhere, or did someone leave trash somewhere or whatever? And if I start seeing stuff like that, then I know that's a place I'm just going to avoid. If there's
when you start seeing tacks and stands and stuff like that, then you know that there's someone in there.
Yeah, or someone left some type of scrape dripper or something like that in a tree. It's like that's a place someone's going to come back to. So I'll usually try to avoid those types of places, but. So speaking of kind of, your approach to water and stuff like that, and you kind of talked about the oxbow and the water, and you like to hunt, sit a bend, or near a bend, in a creek system. But, do you have a go-to tactic that you found that has given you the ability to have consistently, hunt or harvest mature bucks on public land? Like, is there one thing that you kind of like every year you're like, this is kind of my go-to. It's like, if nothing else, I know I can do this and I'm going to have a pretty good odds.
Well, yeah, basically my go-to tactic would be to hunt a funnel in the best case scenario is I either have a beaver dam on one side of me, which say the wind's blowing from the dam towards me, and a creek at my back, or on a bend in a creek, and a funnel like that. It doesn't have to be 20-yard wide funnel that's obvious that everybody can see on the map. It could be 100 yards wide, and there's a blowdown, or there's just the trails are all forcing the deer to come through. But I like sitting funnels, and I sit all day, and I don't go in there until late October or early November. So my tactic basically is staying out, keeping the human scent out of there. I try to always approach my stand through water or crossing water right before my stand, so I don't walk on any of the deer trails that I'm hunting. And I think that makes a big difference. I mean, I've worn chest waders and waded through a beaver dam because the only way I would have been able to not step on tracks was to start a couple 300-400 yards away, and I'd wade right down the edge of a beaver dam all the way until I get to where there's a beaver levee where the deer are crossing and a creek, and it's a nice funnel right there. And I shot a nice one in 2014 doing that, and just try not to leave any ground scent, and pick my spots and my times to go in the right time. Not pound it early season, and get everything tipped off. That's what's going on in there, all the deer.
Right. So is it fair to say you're hunting as the season goes, you'll get a little bit more aggressive? Like, so what's it take for you to get aggressive on a hunt? Like,
exactly.
Is October you just kind of, nipping at the edges type of thing before you dive in? Or is there a reason you would ever dive in during an early season hunt? Like, what's that kind of, I guess, how do you play that through mentally, when you're deciding how aggressive to be or not?
For up until this season, I told you about taking the kids in October. So, this year was different, but in the past and for years now, I've always spent October basically hunting my does, getting some deer for the freezer. I got into the hunting beast 3 or 4 years ago and started following their tactics, and I'm trying to implement some of that stuff. Although this year I wasn't able to as much because I was taking the kids out in the early season and getting close to the buck bedding. I mean, everything I've always done is revolved around bedding, buck and doe bedding since the 80s. I started reading articles about that. But as far as getting aggressive, it just depends on the situation and my access. If I got a solid access where, say, I can walk down a feeder creek and not walk down any trails and get to a stand and get up in there and have a good wind and say that we got a high pressure and my milkweed's floating high all day long, and nothing knows that I'm there, and I'm seeing deer moving, but I'm just not the buck I want, I might go back there the next day, as long as everything's right. And I might hunt the same spot for 4 days in a 2-week period if I think that that's the place I need to be to kill one. It just depends on if you have the approach to be able to get there or not.
Right.
I would never do that if I had to walk, down deer trails and had deer blowing at me on the way in and the way out.
Right. So
that's why I like to approach my stands from the other side of a creek, because the deer that I'm bothering on the side that I'm walking in on usually aren't the deer that I'm seeing anyway. The deer are lazy. They want to stay on the side of the creek that they're on. I see very few places where they're crossing during daylight. So that's, and maybe I'm messing them up a little bit, but on the other side of the creek. But I'm only going to worry about the ones that I want to come through the funnel that I'm on.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, there's it's interesting. There's a lot of guys that I've talked to, and they said, well, I went to this, this tree stand set. All the sign looks right. All my scouting told me that this is where I need to be, but I sat there all day and I didn't see anything. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and tear that set down and move. And I'm like, no, don't, don't move. Like, if your gut and all the signs there, and just because that big buck didn't walk past there that day, there's a chance that you didn't disturb anything. So the element of surprise is still there for the day that he does decide to come through there. That just might not be his everyday route. So that's an interesting thing, how that you pointed that out.
Yeah, I hunt mobile on public always. So I'm either in the Lone Wolf Climber or I have the stand and sticks. And so it's not like I'm running to a same exact tree all the time. And besides that, I just don't think that if you do, put it this way, I'm getting my stuff twisted around here. If you do all your scouting in the preseason, I do most of my scouting in March and April, so I already know that I'm in the right spot, So to give up on it after hunting it one time, after putting in all the time, that you got to be positive that you're in the right place. And if you have a good approach, it's worth hunting it again. And that buck I killed in Ohio in 2016, it was the 4th time I hunted that spot in 10 days. But every time I could get in there undetected, they didn't know I was there. I saw them 3 out of the 4 days. I thought I had to make an adjustment and move a little bit closer. Ended up shooting them. So, to say that, and we're talking within a couple, maybe 5-acre area that I hunted in those 4 days. So I didn't bother them at all. And the day I killed them, there was 3 Pope and Youngs chasing a doe around in there.
Nice.
So
yeah, I mean, I think one thing that guys do is they definitely two different things happen. I think I know for sure I've been guilty of both of them, and I'm trying to get better at it. One is paralysis by analysis, where you have so much information that you're not able to distill down a plan, or to like a single point of nugget of information, right? Which is one. And then the other one is that, you have your information and then you second guess yourself constantly and, don't go with your gut. And I've learned that, the more often whenever I've gone with my gut, I've seen what I was supposed to see or what I thought I was going to see. And just to trust your scouting, like you said, you put all that time and all that effort in, your eyes don't deceive you. You know what I mean? Like, you saw what you saw for a reason. Doesn't mean necessarily that the buck you think that is living there is necessarily going to always come by. But I think, we should be a little bit more trusting in our abilities. And I'm curious to ask this question, actually, because I think I was going to ask this a little bit later, but, I know, your approach, at least from following you a little bit, it's probably a little bit more of an old school approach, I think, it's at least to my experience, like a lot of the guys who follow the hunting beast kind of method that hunt mobile, hunting buck beds and stuff like that philosophy, are more relying on woodsmanship than they are any type of technology and stuff like that. And it seems to me that that's kind of your approach. Is that, am I kind of picking up on that correctly?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I grew up having to do. And in order to learn how to hunt, you learn from your mistakes that you make, and you learn from the deer, what's going on. And, you have to know, I mean, I started out measuring every buck bed. I didn't start out, but after reading an article back in the mid 80s in North American Whitetail about, I'm trying to figure out how to find big buck beds. how do I find big bucks? Well, you got to, know there's one there, so you got to find big tracks. So I start measuring buck tracks, deer tracks in general, everything. Walking around, scouting in the wintertime. I did it for, a couple decades, just measuring. Finally now I just know by looking at them, after a while.
Right.
I finally learned my lesson. But and it's stuff like that, looking for tracks, looking for sign, just using, common sense is all it is, deer hunting, I mean, I don't have anything against technology. I mean, I have my Scout Look app on my phone and my Onyx maps, and I'm looking at aerial photos, and I'm marking all my sign, and all that makes it great. I remember back in the early 90s thinking to myself, if I actually knew where I was standing when I'm looking at this topo map, wouldn't that be awesome, And now I can watch myself walk around, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I use trail cameras. I run probably 30 cameras, but I have them spread out over many properties between Ohio and Pennsylvania, and I love using the historical data off of the cameras. And I've been doing that for years, and basically how I ended up, part of the reason why I killed that buck in Ohio in 2016 also was I had his pictures of him going through that area in daylight in within the 6th and the 12th of November, and he never ever walked around in daylight. So I said to myself, I'm going to hunt this spot as much as I can get away with it, in that time frame. And and I've had that work in, like the buck I mentioned in PA that I shot, where I had to wade through the swamp. I ran a camera on that the year before. Usually I'll run a camera before I ever hunted on a new spot. Mm-hmm. It might be the same piece of public I've been hunting for a long time, but it's just a new area. Mm-hmm. It's another part of the section that I haven't been in. And I'll run a camera or two in there and let them just sit there all year long. Now they call it soaking. I just called it letting them sit. But right. That's what I started doing that years ago, kind of by accident. Just I couldn't get to all my cameras before gun season one year, and I just left some cameras out. And I was like, wow, look at all this stuff I learned, because my camera was out through the whole of O season, and I wasn't in there, and there was no pictures of guys, and the cameras weren't stolen. So they were still there. So,
it's funny. Spot. It's funny how, everything ends up getting a name. It's like you were saying, like back in the day, we just called it letting our cameras out. And then, you were mentioning hunting mobile, back in the day, we just called that hunting mobile. Now we call everyone, it's running gun. Like it's something new, but guys have been doing it for a while, It's just kind of the way things go. John and I were being crotchety old men before the call about millennials and those millennials, and they're in their interwebs. But there's some good things that come with age, right? I think knowledge comes with age, and I know for me, as the years go, I use my technology differently. It's not that I don't use it anymore. It's kind of the same way you're talking about. I use a map app, which is really nice to kind of let me know where I'm at and can mark things so I can get back to the same places later and so on and so forth. I use trail cameras, and this year, the past 2 years were the first 2 years that I really started using historical data more so than recent data. And so I really don't even look at my cameras all that much during the actual season. Really, it's more I do a pull, right before the season starts usually, at least on the private pieces, and then I kind of make my game plan on what I had seen from the year prior. What I'm really kind of looking for during that given season is the one I want to hunt still alive. Number one. Number two, is he on the property when I think he should be on the property? Or his pattern staying the same? So if he's never there during the summer, but he's always there in November, I don't want to see him in the summer. You know what I mean? But if I all of a sudden start seeing him in the summer, then that tells me something's changing. So is my historical pattern still going to be accurate? I don't know. I have to kind of wait and see. But I started using it in the same way. It's interesting that you mentioned, measuring, tracks and buck beds, because, my buddy Greg Litzinger is the same way. And that's kind of how he does a lot of his scouting, is he'll cut a track and kind of measure. So I'm always curious, man, do you have like a size that you look at that says, if there is a track that is so many inches, like that's a big buck, like that's like your starting point? And if there's
I would say as far as, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and with the bed, the same thing. Like, is there a certain size you're looking for with a bed? Like, if it measures so far, long, that's what I would consider a mature deer. Before we continue our conversation, let's talk about Wicked Tree Gear saws. Are you still using one of those flimsy plastic hand saws? A girly man saw? If you are, then I suggest you head over to wickedtreegear.com and replace it with one of the toughest saws on earth. Use promo code TRUTH at checkout and save 20% on your purchase, and also receive free ground shipping. And now back to the show.
Well, what I measure as far as a bed goes, from the tip of where their elbow is, and we get a ton of. I mean, we live off of Lake Erie here. We get a lot of snow, so I've gotten a chance to measure a lot of beds over the years pretty accurately. I mean, I don't measure them anymore, but I would always go by 44 to 52 inches from the tip of the elbow to the round of the rump on a buck. Anywhere in that area, it's going to be a mature deer. Now, as far as the track goes, I'd say like 3 fingers, 3 inches wide on just a regular step down. Just the deer stepping in 2 3/4 to 3 inches is, and some deer have smaller feet, some deer have bigger feet. I'm not saying it's a total tell-all, but when you put things together, and you find a bed that's in this, say it's in the late postseason, and there's a rub and there's a bed there and there's big tracks. It's pretty safe to say that that's a buck bedding area if it's in the right spot. So they don't. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so kind of talking about buck bedding, because I'm really interested. I'm always interested to hear guys' perspective on hunting buck beds and stuff. What's your tell, like whenever you're looking for an area that's going to be good for buck bedding? I mean, I know, hypothetically, or not hypothetically, but theoretically, if I'm looking for buck bedding, it's like I'm looking for, what's an area that he can avoid any type of social pressure? What's an area that he can avoid just pressure in general? Is there an elevation change? Is there some type of knob somewhere where he can kind of have the wind to his back while he can see down? That way he can, kind of smell anything come in or see anything coming. Like those kind of fundamental things, like I get. But is there anything that you kind of look at or look for, like a certain type of, is there, a certain cluster of rubs, within a certain area? Are you looking for to kind of say, okay, this is definitely someone's bedroom. I'm in somebody's bedroom.
Well, they could have rubs, they could not have rubs. It's really hard to say. I'm just usually looking on the transition line, especially since I hunt a lot of like beaver dams and stuff like that. You'll have a real thick area usually coming into a more open wooded type area and something like that, a lot of the times. And usually they're laying right in there and we're to the point where not so far in that they can't see out into the open. A lot of times I think that they're in there with bedding with the wind blowing over top of their back, and they can see what's in front of them. And they do that, even on the edges of fields and stuff like that. They'll bed like that. But it's just going to be a thick area. Not always going to have rubs in it. Not always going to have a rub line coming out of it. But if it does, I mean, it definitely is going to help you. But when I a lot of the spots I hunt, I've been hunting for years. So if I'm going into a new place, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to start walking all the transition areas along the creek, along the oxbows, down along the swamp, look for points going out, jetting out into the beaver dam, stuff like that. That's usually where you're going to find the beds. The bucks and the does is both. Right.
So sticking with the bedding theme here, I'm interested in this answer too, because I picked this up from, 2 things I guess I picked up from Dan Enfall, but I'm curious how you approach this. Do you hunt, when you're going to hunt a buck bed, are you setting up for him to come back to bed, or are you predominantly going to set up for when he's leaving bed?
Well, I'm no expert on hunting buck beds like those guys on the Hunting V-Star. In fact, like I said, I mostly am a rut hunter. In the early season, I don't really, I just got into that the last few years. But when I have set up on buck beds that I've found scouting in the springtime, it's always for an evening hunt. I've never sat in the morning. I don't like sitting mornings in October. And I hunt, I'm mainly take my vacation during the rut, sit all day long in a good spot type. That's basically my deal. What I do. I mean, I worry more about doe bedding than buck bedding, to be honest with you. I mean, I want to find every bed I can. Right. I want to know where the deer are bedding, because I don't think you have really a heck of a chance on public land if you're not close to bedding. So I'm looking for an apple trees or acorns that are close to the beds as possible, and I'm going to hunt them in the evening and hoping that they're coming to that spot to feed, while there's still enough light to shoot when I'm on the public land.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what I picked up from those guys is pretty much exactly what you were saying, which is, not a lot of morning hunts, of course, unless there's someone that you can get on in the morning before it gets back to bed. The other reason being was that, I think it was Dan that I was talking to that was mentioning that, when you're looking at a buck bed and you're scouting a buck bed and you find one, you're going to see two trails. You're going to see a really predominant trail that kind of goes straight into the buck bed, and you're going to see probably another trail that kind of like is not delivering straight into the bed. And essentially that trail that's leaving or that is coming directly from the buck bed in a straight line is their exit. Whenever they're approaching their bed, they're going to J-hook around, which makes it really tough to hunt it because they're going to actually check that spot before they get in. Whenever they go to leave the bed, they're leaving. They're not. They know what's in front of them.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're worried about which way the wind's blowing when they leave the bed. I think that when they're coming into bed down, that's when they're worried about scenting that area. They want to scent check before they lay down, and once they're laying there, they're laying there for a reason. So they got the wind at their advantage of one direction, and they're looking the other direction. And when they're ready to come out of there, I think they're just coming out of there. Whether it's a crosswind, tailwind, nosewind, it doesn't matter. They're going to where they're planning on going. And
right.
From what those guys say is too is that hunt that just specifically are always setting up on beds like a Dan Infold or one of those other guys that are on the B site all the time. They're definitely setting up as close as they can because the bucks aren't moving real far in that period of time. Like I say, they might go 60 yards in 20 minutes or a half hour or whatever.
Right, trying to break that.
I'm more or less at the first food past that is what I've been doing.
Okay.
When I do hunt in the evening over a buck bed. And I'm talking I'm not talking food like a field. I mean, I'm talking an apple tree, choke cherries, beech nut, whatever.
Right.
Something in close.
Some type of acorn flat or anything that's in between him and wherever he's planning to go. John, what do you think about the whole buck bedding thing, man? It's what have your eyes told you in the past years?
What my eyes have told me, believe none of what I see and half of what I hear about buck beds. No. I tell you, man, it's no. I mean, it is interesting. Like up until the last couple of years, I was 100% convinced that everything I did was on the basis that the buck does not move unless the wind is in his face, and that's the direction he's going. And there might be a little bit of an angle, getting a little bit of crosswind, scent checking, but I tell you, since I moved to Iowa and hunting a lot of these ag fields and field edges and these huge, huge crop fields, what I've come to the conclusion of is almost what Mike was saying to a T. When they're coming to bed, I think the wind is very important. But when they're leaving their bed and they're headed to a food source or a water source, I probably saw 70% of my bucks walking with the wind blowing in their back. Mm-hmm. It's almost like whatever direction the wind was blowing, that was the direction they were walking. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I haven't put all the pieces together because, every property is a little different. And, what we think the wind's doing, who knows what it was doing 100 yards further. And maybe that was in his danger zone. Mm-hmm. He left his safe spot just to cross that field, and then he got back into his other safe spot or the wind cone that he needed. It is very interesting. I don't think that we can interview enough people about betting because Mike already taught me something new already. Right. Just hearing his perspective and how he kind of reads that and puts that into his, in his plan to assault.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's always interesting to hear how different guys are hunting things in different areas and what they're seeing and what they're experiencing. Because I used to kind of fall under the same thing, John, where I kind of always assumed that they're always going to travel with the wind in their face, and then I started seeing things that were telling me that that's not 100% true. And what really changed, I think my perspective on, especially how I set my stands up, is it was when I had heard of it, but when I started really understanding about how to cut the wind or how to cut the angle on the wind, like once I started figuring out that and being more mindful of it as I was setting up my location, that was whenever I really started seeing a lot more deer movement. So I guess that would lead me to another question, Mike. Whenever you're setting up a stand, when you're pinpointing a stand location or a tree, like how are you using the wind? Are you, it's a good, I guess, kind of question. It's like, are you looking to cut the wind? Or you? Go ahead.
Well, it depends on the stand site. I mean, I have stands that are in some smaller funnels that are only 25 yards wide, and even though I have people I hear it on podcasts and that mature bucks won't walk through those. That's not what I've been seeing. I'm on one particular stand like that. I shot 2 bucks in the 130s, which for around here is a good buck out of the same stand. So, but and the reason why I like to use water is just for that reason right there alone, is if you're on a bend in a creek, you got so many different trees that you can get in for the wind. So if you want to keep the wind off of you, I'm not really worried. The worst case scenario is if I think that a buck's going to come down a funnel, say from the west, and the wind's blowing out of the east straight down through there, then yeah, of course I don't want to be up in there. Now, if there's a high pressure system, it changes the whole deal, because when there's a high pressure system and it's sunny out and cold, it seems like your thermals are rising more, so you don't have to worry so much about the wind. I mean, sometimes I'll hunt with the wind blowing right across the trail. Right. It just depends on if my milkweed's staying 20 feet up, I'm not moving. I'm going to stay right there. I like to get up against creeks because it seems like the wind where there's a creek will sort of follow that creek down if you have it coming at you at the right angle. You know what I mean? And you can watch your milkweed float out through there. I think it has something to do with the thermals in the water. Mm-hmm. Same with beaver dams. I set up, like last year when I killed that buck in Ohio, I was set up off the edge of a beaver dam, and that water was sitting here even though it was cold out, it was sunny all day, it was a high pressure, and I'm dropping milkweed, and it's hitting that water where that water was laying about 40 yards behind me, and it was just shooting straight up and going. There's that buck that I killed came straight downwind. I didn't have no ozonics, and I didn't have anything other than just trying to keep my odor down. He never knew I was there, and he came through the swamp. Right. So he couldn't smell me. So that swamp thermal, that water will heat up, and the air rises, and then it pulls more air, and then if you're set up towards the water, it's going to pull your scent that direction. Right. Especially if the wind's already going that way in the first place, and it's going to pull it, and it's going to stay high.
Right.
So,
yeah, and to your point,
so stuff like that, you just learn from trial and error, dropping milkweed and seeing what goes on.
Yeah, and then to your point, it's like you said, you like to cross water, so that's almost a natural barrier for you too, because you're not so concerned with what's happening on the other side necessarily. So now everything's kind of working in to your advantage there. So I'm curious, man. Like we talked, about some of the successes that you've had on public ground, and you've taken some nice deer on public ground, and I'm just curious, what everyone has. I guess a different experience or different feelings toward hunting public ground. Some guys are good at it and seem to be able to get it done. Some guys really, really struggle with it and just enjoy the grind, so they continue going back for punishment. That would probably be more of me. But I'm curious. It's I've managed to have some success, but it's gotten the better of me more often than not. But I'm just curious, man. What is it that you think that you do, or your approach, that allows you to have success in instances where others might find struggles?
Well, for one, I'm persistent and just dedicated. So I spend a lot of time scouting, and I'm not afraid to go wherever I need to go to get to what my goal is. And the other thing is I look for certain setups. So a lot of my stands on public land on the 3 different pieces that I hunt in PA are all kind of similar in the way they are, because of the situation, how they're set up. So I'm setting up in something that I've found works for me, well, albeit, mostly in funnel areas, but, it works for the wind. It works for the approach to get there. The deer don't know I'm there. I always, there's going to be doe bedding nearby, and the bucks are going to cruise through there. And if you sit there all day long, which is another thing that I think makes me successful on the public land, is I'm going to sit there all day long. I'm going to go the extra mile, and that's basically that simple. I mean, there's no magic pill. I mean, it's just common sense and grind it out, and try to hunt the right time, and just be confident that you're in the right spot.
Right. Yeah, I definitely I'll drink to that. That's it's one of the things. There's no there's no I guess replacement for what I like to call stubbornness. You know, it's the one time that my stubbornness actually works in my favor. It's like I climb into a tree and I'm like, I'm not moving all day. You know what I mean? Now I will say there was a time this year I was in Ohio hunting public ground, and I probably would have been wiser to move my stand, because I had a feeling I needed to be in another spot. It was one of those instances like I was talking about earlier. I just wasn't trusting my gut. I had a feeling that I needed to be in another spot. I was stubborn because I was like, no, I just need to stick it out in this spot. And I wasn't rewarded. So that was an instance. But, it's hindsight's 2020.
I wouldn't let that bother you, buddy. You know how many times I've sat in the stand and not seen anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just part of the deal. That's the first thing that everybody needs to be able to accept, that you're going to fail way more than you're going to succeed when you're bow hunting.
Right. Yeah.
And once you can get past that, and once you can not worry about other people and what they do and what they shoot, I mean, I'm a way happier hunter when I quit worrying about what they killed, deer and gun on the next property, this, that, the other thing. All it does is drive you nuts.
Yeah.
I'm only going to kill the deer that is in front of me when I'm there to kill it.
Right.
And that is all you can do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly, man. That was my approach this year. We actually John and I did a podcast on it where it was just, I had a target buck. I saw him on my first sit of opening Saturday of Pennsylvania season, or first statewide. Mm-hmm. And he was just within bow range, but behind some stuff, behind some junk, and I couldn't get a shot at him. And he was with another deer that was right underneath my stand, and he didn't win me. He just got uncomfortable. Like I think he knew something was up. He just couldn't pinpoint what it was. So they didn't blow out of there. He just backed up and walked off, and then the deer that I was hunting walked off too. And that was the third time I'd seen him in 4 sits, going back to last late season. And that deer was driving me crazy because I was watching the weather, and I was, that property's 3 hours from where I live, and I had to, quite a drive. So I was watching the weather for the weekends to try to find the right weekend to go back in and go after him. And the weekends just weren't lining up, and it was driving me crazy. And so I just, I was like, what? I'm going out to my buddy's property out here on the eastern part of the state. And he's got a small little 3-acre parcel. His family does it, butts up to some private or to some public. I was like, I'm going to go hunt that transition between the public and his parents' property. And I was like, and if I see a deer that makes me want to pull the trigger, I was like, I'm going to, release an arrow. And I went out there, a nice PA, rack PA 8, and shot it, and was super happy. You know what I mean? And it was just, and it was actually, it felt like there was a relief, or weight that was lifted, which was nice. And so everything you just said rings true, man. It's like, you just got to hunt for yourself, whatever's going to make you happy.
Exactly.
You can't get caught up in the heat, the keeping up with the Joneses and stuff like that, because it's just, you're going to drive yourself crazy doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you're from PA, you got to remember that what the possibilities are around here too. It's not like you're in, one of these big buck Midwestern states. So.
Yeah. You got to, well, I think it's important to kind of, know that you have to set your expectations, correctly for where you're at. It's, for here, for if you're in the eastern part of the state, it's different than it would be in the western part of the state, just like it'd be different if you were in Illinois or whatever. You have to set the expectations for what's possible for where you hunt, and that's, so I think, trying to hunt something mature, or trying to try new tactics or something like that, it was one way to kind of continue to kind of push the envelope a little bit, is, do things that are going to stimulate you, what I mean? Not necessarily, what size is the deer, but like, how am I going to get better? And how can I, continue to challenge myself, I think is a good way to look at it. But, before, I know we're running up on getting close to an hour here, and I have a couple more questions I want to toss your way. And I'm curious about your approach to scouting. I want to get a sense of the things you like to focus on. I know you already mentioned that, you like to really kind of, it sounded like you like to focus on the spring in terms of like when you do the majority of your scouting. But let's set the scenario that, we're going to say John and I are going to take you to a new piece of public land that's, just wherever in Pennsylvania, eastern part of the state, let's move you away from Pittsburgh, and you've never been there before, and you're walking in for the first time. You're going to try to diagnose where you want to set up or what you think a good opportunity is. Like, what's your first step in doing that?
Well, I'm going to be looking at aerial photos of the place, and I'm going to be at the photos. I'm going to look for places that are, not right behind parking lots, that aren't easy to access. Hopefully somewhere where I can get to by crossing a creek or two, or a beaver dam or something, I'm going to be looking for a place where I can get away from other guys, because that's where the deer are going to be moving at. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I wouldn't hunt the property if it wasn't going to be swampy and full of creeks and beaver dams and stuff. So we're going to assume that's what it's like.
Right.
I'd go in there and I would just walk up and down all the creeks, the oxbows. I'd be looking for bedding, on the beaver dams. A lot of times those beaver dams will have goldenrod intermixed with them, and dogwood and red brush and stuff like that. All that in transition lines is where I'm going to be walking, right. Looking for any bowls in those areas or points. That's where the bedding's going to be, and then I'm going to start looking for the nearest food to where those beds are at. And if I can get on a funnel somewhere on in that area where there's does bedding at, and hopefully there's sign of bucks coming through, rubs and scrapes from the previous years. You just you got to blend it all in together and come up with a plan. I'm going to run a camera there before I'd ever even hunt it. So the first year, it'd be a camera sitting in a couple good spots, maybe right in some bedding or on a funnel. And we're going to find out right away how many guys are in there, because the camera's still there when the season's over, and no one was in there, because pretty much they're stolen on public land if anybody sees them.
Right, right.
But yeah, that's basically how I go about it.
All right, so you're looking at aerials, so when you dive into like a topo map, right? Because I know that's one thing you were mentioning, using the Onyx maps and being able to kind of see exactly where you're standing. Yep. It's like, so whenever say you've done your aerial scouting, you've kind of picked out some spots that are near water that you want to investigate or whatever. Is there anything that you're going to look for in a topo versus just an aerial image of the space? Is there any type of benches or a saddle that you're going to look for, or just minute elevation changes or anything like that you're going to kind of try to pinpoint?
Yeah. Like I said, around the area I'm used to scouting and hunting is more or less flat, so there's not a lot of terrain features. There might be some, 10 or 15 foot elevation changes, and yeah, any kind of subtle elevation change is going to help. Any kind of low spot, the deer are going to usually move. So yeah, if I on a topo, that's what I'd be looking for. Little spurs or little high points that are coming into a swamp or something like that. But yeah, basically it's pretty much flat in the areas that I'm hunting. So There's not a whole lot to look for in that. So the only difference that the topo is going to tell me that an aerial photo would be, like I say, little points coming out with which are going to have trees on anyway. They're pretty easy to see from either from the aerial photo in the first place. So
right, okay. So I mean, it sounds like as far as the maps go or whatever, like with it being as flat as it is, it's you're really looking for more habitat change and like maybe lines of
breaks,
transition of from one habitat to another.
Transition line.
Yeah, from whether it's from a clear cut into a swamp or hardwood into a swamp, whatever it is, like you're looking for that definitive line that they might want to travel. So I know you mentioned a couple of different times the barometric pressure, having high pressure. So I'm curious, you mentioned, watching your milkweed fly high or whatever, stay high whenever you're having a good high pressure day and stuff like that. Yep. Are you also paying attention to barometric pressure to kind of time when you're going to go hunt, or are you looking for that just for clearly how you're going to play the wind, or does it more play into like your overall hunting strategy, like from a longer term view?
I'm going to hunt the days I'm going to be able to hunt no matter what the barometric pressure is. But for the late season, like I'm still hunting in Ohio right now. I've been getting out. Sunday was the last time I was able to get out, and I'm going to try to get out again this weekend. And yeah, when there's a high pressure, like today would have been the day to get there. But when the deer are going to get up and feed, seems like more or less to me in late season. Now, I'm not sure if I'd see a correlation with that during the rut, because during the rut, just anything can happen anytime. And I'm spending my vacation during the rut. So basically, if you're asking, do I see more deer when there's high pressure? I can't really tell you that that's the case. It's just, but it does definitely help the hunting. I'd rather hunt a high pressure than anything, but
right.
It's not always possible, so
right now I
go with what you got.
I hear that it's the grind of the fully employed hunter trying to pick those days.
Yeah,
exactly. I feel your pain. What's how about the moon, man? Do you follow the moon at all? Is there anything that you kind of parlay or add or kind of attribute to the moon?
No, I mean, I've tried to believe in the moon. I mean, it's almost like I wanted it to be true, but I just don't see it. I mean, I might be wrong, but I just don't see it. I mean, I was for a while. I was reading Charlie Alzheimer's theory on it triggering the rut, second equinox, second full moon after this fall equinox, and I wasn't seeing that, and this red moon stuff. I mean, I got all my friends are great hunters. They kill big bucks, and they're all grinded out, and they know what they're doing. Everybody around here is way better hunters than me around here. A lot of guys, and they do the same thing. And no one's telling me that you need to be out today because it's a red moon. I mean, in fact, the opposite. During this past year, the day that it was supposed to be the great day, nothing happened around here. Now, it may have went wild somewhere else, but in this area, it wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't the best day of the year to be hunting.
Right. So my experience
by any means.
My experience with the moon was this. It's kind of funny because the first time I decided I was going to follow the moon, like it was like two maybe 3 seasons ago. I was like, you know what, I'm going to follow the moon. So I got, the moon dial thing, and I was checking it out, and I was following which days were going to be good red moon days and so forth. And the first day I went out was supposed to be a really good moon. It was early season. I went out and I was in my stand. It was a brand new spot, piece of public land I'd never hunted before. I actually never scouted it before either. Went in early and just kind of did a speed scout and found a tree and climbed it. And what about 10 minutes, because I always say it's like 10 minutes on either side of the moon is like when you're going to, so if the moon's supposed to be at 3 p.m. or something like that, then it's, 2:50-ish. Yep. It should be when things start to pick up. And what just about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less than before, like the exact red moon time was stated, I saw 3 nice shooter bucks, like clockwork.
No kid.
And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, this moon thing works. I was like, so I tried to follow it the rest of the season, and I didn't see anything. Like it did. Like, so I had my hopes way up, like at first. And I'm not saying like some guys it might work. I think it also depends on the type of property you have. Because I know if you listen to anything from the Drury's and stuff like that, I know that they follow the moon pretty religiously, but they also are on they manage that property for that. And so I think things like that might work. I'm not saying that they don't work. If you have the opportunity to kind of control things a little bit, I'm sure some of these things might play out, as you would expect. But I think whenever you're hunting is, public ground and areas that are getting pressured and stuff like that, there's so many other environmental things that are going on, outside of the moon and barometer, that, I think the barometer personally, I think that it does help. Kind of like you said, it's like, I won't wait for a good barometric pressure day to go hunt. If I have a day, I'm going to hunt, but I don't mind when there's a high pressure day on the day that I'm going to go hunt. We'll put it that way. John, I'm curious, man. What do you? I don't know that I've ever asked you this. What's your moon philosophy? I don't know that I've ever asked you that.
I've got a Ouija board that we can break out and predict the patterns with. No, I mean, I'm like what you were saying. I've had some situations where, my buddy texts me and he's like, hey, according to the moon guide, we're going to have movement at a field edge today at 5:26 p.m. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm on a field edge, but, that's not why I chose this spot. And I'd be damned if at 5:26 a buck comes walking down the field edge, And I'm like, okay, wait a second. If I hunt 70 days a year, there's going to be a couple of days where they hit the nail on the head. You know what I mean? So my biggest buck this year that I was chasing, he ended up going 173 as a 4-year-old, which is kind of crazy. I thought he was 5, but turns out we believe he was 4. Of course, we have no birth certificate, but just kind of going off a body. I don't think they were going to send in the jaw. A shotgun hunter killed him, but at 6:26 p.m., Red Moon said that he would be transitioning from bedding to food. And I got a trail camera picture of him. And when that trail camera picture was taken, I was at full draw on him and just needed him to turn broadside to give me a 30-yard chip shot. And he didn't, and he never did turn. So he walked away. But, that was an instance that was on October 26th. The Moon Guide nailed that one to the minute. Man, I tell you, it's, where does it stop?
Yeah.
Let's look at the barometric pressure. Let's look at the wind direction. Let's look at the moon. Let's look at the food. Oh, yeah, there could have been a coyote that chased him an hour before that, which completely derailed his time schedule.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many factors that come into it. I'm not a big believer.
Yeah.
In summary, I'm not a big believer in the moon guide. I would rather flip quarters.
The problem with these moon theories is they always seem to come with some kind of cost to be able to find out when the good days are. And a lot of times you got to follow the money on what's behind things. Not accusing anybody of trying to make a buck, but it seems to be part of the deal too. So and the way the industry goes with a lot of stuff. So
yeah, I kind of like the Ouija board.
Do you guys do you like fortune cookies? They're fun, right? You know what I mean? You buy a fortune cookie, the cookies taste pretty decent, and you get a funny little fortune at the end.
Yeah.
That's kind of the, like I said, I don't want to discredit anything with the moon because I know that there is some science behind it. But my money is riding on wind direction and, my food plots.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Yep. Yeah, I think for me, it's I'll take the fortune cookie and see what that gives me. That's
It's like, you can have my fortune. I just want the cookie.
Right, exactly. It's that's what I'm going with. Look, whoever folks like to follow it, and they I'm all for different strokes for different folks, man. If someone believes in it and they're having success, and I think that's why they're having success, then far be it from me to tell them that they're wrong. Rock it out. For me, John, it was just kind of something you were alluding to. It's like you start putting all these different things together, and it's like at some point, it's just like it becomes too much. You know what I mean? It's like just my historical data on my camera told me X. Maybe I did some, maybe I had the property that I was going to hunt. Maybe I had the fortune of being able to do some, do some scouting from a distance, some glassing, you know what I mean? And maybe I saw what I needed to see there. And then maybe, as I'm creeping up on the rut, maybe I'm seeing the scrapes I need to see in the places I need to see them, the rubs I need to see where I need to see those. And like, to me, that tells me enough of what I need to know. It's like, I don't need to know much else beyond that for me to make a decision. And I think I feel better that way because I start to drive myself crazy with the more data input that I get. It's like I start to having that paralysis by analysis where it's I try to just take the bare minimum information and go with the gut and roll the dice. It's what they call it, hunting and not catching or watching.
That's right.
But hey, man, we've kept you here for nearly an hour, man, and I want to be sensitive to your time. I know your boys were shooting you up with a Nerf gun before we got on the phone here. They might want to take a couple more cracks at Dad before bed, so we want to make sure they get those in. But before we let you get going, man, if you wouldn't mind, I always like to kind of close with our buddies that come on and talk with us with a hunting story. So if you wouldn't mind, give us a memorable hunt that you've been on, and let us know what state you're in, what time of year you're hunting, give us every detail from the truck back to the tailgate. And this could be a successful harvest or a near miss or, anything in between. It's up to you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, since I already talked about my sons earlier, which was, one of the best moments ever, I'll go with the buck I shot last year in Ohio in 2016. It was a buck I'd been after for 3 years, and I like I mentioned earlier, used some historical data and where I decided to set up on him. And I had seen him a couple times in the first week of November between I think it was the 5th was the first day I went in there. I just stayed out of there the whole year. And when I went in and I saw him on the 7th and the 9th. And then the 14th was the day that I killed him. And I noticed that he had went past. I almost killed him on the 9th. He was with a doe, and I snort wheezed him, and he came up, and that one limb that's always in the way.
Yeah.
Well, that was in the way, so I couldn't shoot. I had to wait the draw, and that didn't work out. Well, when he got out of there, he knew something was up, but he didn't know what it was. He heard me draw my bow back is what it was, and he looked around. It was real windy that day, and he went past this cherry tree that he had went past on the 7th. So I was like, I got to hunt that the next time I get in here. So that day I get there. It was in about 1 PM because I had to work the previous night, and I had to work that night because I worked third shift. So I wanted to get a hunt in. And when I walked down in there, I was able to access this area through a feeder creek that I could walk down through, so my boots weren't really touching the leaves until I got right down by my stand. And right when I walked in there to get into the feeder creek, I jumped some deer. I didn't see what they were. I knew one of them was a doe, but I wasn't sure exactly what they were. Well, I got down and I got my stand. About 3 o'clock, 3:30, somewhere in that area, this doe starts snorting to the north, and the wind was blowing out of the southwest. And like I said earlier, it was staying high up above that beaver dam. So I knew she didn't smell me. And then I could hear footsteps, and here comes this buck that I called the Intruder Buck. He was a big 8-point, like a 140, and he's coming on the trail. Just believe it or not, the trail that I had hunted the last time, he came right down it. And so I watched him go by, and it looked like he was going to maybe come my way. And once he got down even with me, he's about 40 yards out. I grunted to him a couple times, which I don't usually like to call to deer unless they're walking away from me. I don't blind call or anything. So he started walking towards that doe. That doe was to the north. He came from the south, and she was snorting at him. Now, a lot of times guys think that because a deer's snorting that the jig is up, and that isn't all. They snort at each other, you know. And well, anyway, so he started going towards her, and it was getting later and later. I called to him a few times. I even got the rattle bag out and rattled a few times, and I could hear a deer walking out in front of me to the south, but below the trail that 8-point had come in. I could hear a deer walking down to the leaves, and it was right on a transition, so there's patches of real thick stuff that they bed in. And I could hear a deer walking through the swamp, through the cattails, to the direct southwest of me, and that's where I suspected that buck had been bedding. The buck I shot, I called him Super Freak. I was after him for 3 years. He had 2 big drop tines, although he broke one of them off after Velvet. But so he was, which I didn't know at the time, but he was coming right from the southwest through the cattails. So out in front of me to the south, I hear this other deer walking, and it turns out it's a doe. And she's walking right down the transition straight at me, and I could hear a buck grunting behind her. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's freaking deer all over the place all of a sudden, And she comes walking down by me, and I could see the buck. He was probably about maybe 60 yards behind her. Meanwhile, the first buck that I called Intruder, I can't see him. I can hear him walking around. I know he's messing around with the doe that was to my north, and this other doe is coming down to kind of, I guess, join the party or whatever. She's coming down the transition straight at me, and I can hear this buck grunting behind her. And then right when she gets almost even with me, I can see him, and it was another like a 125, 130-inch 8 that's been there for a few years, but he just doesn't get any bigger. And I call him Intimidator. But anyway, so I see him, and I'm like, that's him. They're both out now. Where's the Super Freak at?
Right.
And I could hear this deer walking behind me, and she went into the cattails, right with about 20 yards from me. And when she went into the cattails, Super Freak started chasing her through. You could hear him splashing through the swamp, chasing her around, and she ran right up underneath my tree. The first buck, the 148, came running down also, which I was like, I hear deer running. They were behind me. I had to turn all the way around the tree, and of course, I was in standing sticks, so I didn't have really any shooting lanes cut there, and I just by sheer luck, the buck that stopped, the doe was on one side of the tree, and the buck that stopped 8 to 10 yards below me was Super Freak. So I put one right through him, and he bounded off about, 60, 70 yards, and he bedded down, and I was shooting a lighted knock, and it looked like when he took off, it looked like it might have been too far back.
Mm-hmm.
So when he bedded down, and it started getting dark, and he bedded down in some goldenrod, and I'm sitting up in the stand. I got to go to work, and and it looks like when the goldenrod's swaying back and forth, and it looks to me like he's moving.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all freaked out. So I call my boss. I get someone. I'm the supervisor, so I had to get someone to replace me that night. And I sat at that stand for 5 hours and stared at that knock. And I kept swearing it was moving. Well, the whole time the buck was dead. So then I climbed down at like 9:30. I do the super stealth out of there, back up the creek. I get to the truck. I come back the next morning with one of my good friends, Ryan, and we go down there, and I climb back up in the tree, and I look out, and I see the knock still sitting there. And Ryan, I texted him. I'm like, he's down there by the hemlock, and he goes over, and he's like, oh, yeah, it's deader than a doornail. But what really makes the story cool, other than I spent 3 years thinking about this deer and finally killed him, was we get back up to the truck and by the road, and this guy comes flying down the road in the big Duramax, womp, he stops, backs up, and he gets out, and he's like, you son of a, you got him. And I'm just like, yeah. And he's like, can I take a picture of him? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you see that cell tower? And he points, and I'm talking, it's in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm on the Ohio-PA border at this spot.
Okay.
The cell tower is like 3 miles away. He's like, 3 days ago, he was over there with 7 does in the field right in front of my house. He said, down here by the lake, I seen him, a couple miles down the road, like a week ago. He's like, this buck's getting around, and it's just, and that explains a lot why I would see the buck. He'd be around the spot I was hunting for a day or two. Then you don't see him for 7 days, 10 days. Then he's back, So, right. And it just happened, I don't know. I just thought it was pretty cool to realize that he was ranging so much in that area.
Right. That's crazy, man. Dude, that's an awesome story. So you said he had a double drop. Was it a double drop time, but he lost one?
He had two drop tines coming off of his left beam. One went down in front of his eye. They were both about 8 inches. One went down in front of his left eye, and the other one went down in the back of his left eye. And they came down, and he broke the one off sometime after Velvet. But yeah, he was just one of those bucks that you dream about shooting with a bow.
That's awesome.
5.5-year-old buck around here is even Northeast Ohio is not common.
Right. What did you get that guy measured?
I don't really enter my deer in record books, but he's in the 150s easily. Somewhere in that range, yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's a killer. That's a killer story. It's what makes it even cooler is that you chased him for a couple years, man. So you had some history with him, which was rad. And I particularly like the part where you sat in the tree stand and watched a dead deer for 5 hours.
That was awesome. That's the second time I've done that. So fool me once, shame me, shame on you or whatever. But yeah, I've done it twice now. So
nice.
I'm just a little paranoid when it comes to the climbing down.
Oh yeah, I hear that. But hey, man, I'll be sensitive to your time and let you get back to your family. I appreciate you spending some time with us. For anyone out there that's listening, if they want to follow you on Facebook or anything like that, is there, you have a Facebook account, right? Is there anything on Instagram? Do you do Instagram?
No, I have an account, but I just haven't gotten into it yet. I've been planning on getting into that and filming some scouting missions and stuff like that and doing a little bit of that. But I keep it kind of low key. I'm on Facebook at Mike Perry, but and I do friend people when it comes to hunting, and they ask me questions and I answer them and stuff like that. But it's just, I also got to kind of, I don't, you've probably noticed I don't lay a lot of stuff out there. I'm not putting a lot of trail camera pictures, and because I've been, had people follow me around over the years. So, you know what I mean? So you got to kind of watch. You can't give everything away.
Yeah, totally get it, man. So everyone out there listening, if you want to give Mike a follow him on Facebook. You'll see some scouting videos, and as he mentioned, he's always a good dude to answer questions. And John and I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some time with us. And good luck to you here the rest of the season. And we'll make sure we stay in touch over the course of next season and try to get you back on and see how your season went next year. And we'll touch base during football season probably too.
Okay, man. Thanks. Well, I appreciate it, and it was an honor to be on the show. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. I appreciate you. All right, folks. That is a wrap for today's show. It is time to shut this thing down. We'd like to thank Mike for joining us, and we'd like to thank all of you for listening. Also, if you haven't yet, if it's not too much to ask, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and also subscribe to the podcast. If you wouldn't mind, we'd be super appreciative if you would be able to do that. As a quick reminder, I'll be at the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg, February 3rd and 4th at the Exodus Outdoor Gear booth. So be sure to stop by, say hey, and say what's up. Love to talk to any of you about your deer season and see how your season has gone this year, and just kind of catch up and meet as many of you as I possibly can. And with that, we need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Wicked Tree Gear, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Tecumani Seed, and Glacier Coolers. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
I could show you through the door. I ain't welcome anymore. A long time coming if it all false heads, broken letters. Rationalize yourself in numbers, but I gotta get away from here. Gotta get away from here. Oh,